We are live with Metro Council District 4 Representative Jecorey Arthur. Hello, Councilman.
Peace.
How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Awesome.
As best as I can be with everything going on in the world.
Well,
how y'all holding up?
As we're doing great, and as we always say, whenever you call, we respond. So Jared and I are here, Riot and we're going live on a bunch of platforms to hear from you about this new advisory council that is in existence for District 4, which is so cool. So please just take it away, Councilman Jecorey Arthur.
Thank you. And before I dive too deep into the advisory board, I just want to say shout out to all independent media. You are essential because without independent media, we sometimes lose access to independent voices. You aren't controlled by the people who control Louisville, Kentucky. You are your own voices and you have your own thoughts and you have your own priorities and you are really accountable to the people. So I just want to shout you all out and thank you for giving me this platform. And it's actually like the first time I've talked about this publicly. We haven't even sent a press release out about the advisory board. So I'm glad we could talk before it goes out to the mainstream folks. Give it to the people directly.
Thank you.
So the District 4 Neighborhood Advisory Board is something that I had been wanting to do since we took office to really organize our neighborhoods. We didn't do one when we first got in office because the boundaries of the district changed. So we had to get acclimated with the new boundaries, and here we are. So the advisory board is really just taking the 10 residential neighborhoods that our district touches and bringing together representatives of those neighborhoods to help give our office advice. In this republic, we elect people and we essentially give our power to them to make decisions on our behalf, to cast votes, to file legislation, to pass policy. But what we wanted to do with the advisory board was offer a chance for anybody who wants to be more involved with the office to take some of that power back. I believe that the power of the people is stronger than the people in power, but when the two work together, we can really do anything. So this is an example of us working together with the people, again, giving some of that power back so that they get direct decisions in how our office is ran. It's really focused on a few different areas. Number one, policy, of course, legislation. We have a long list of legislation that we're hoping to work on, some of which has been proposed to us by residents, by constituents. And we don't always know the best way to prioritize that legislation. It's really just kind of up in the air. So we're hoping that this advisory board gives us more direction on what we hope that our neighborhoods and our constituents want to see and what they need. It also includes funding. So we have a neighborhood development fund where we have some discretion to spend money on what the neighborhoods need. We also have capital infrastructure funds where we can put money into infrastructure, sidewalks, parks, roads, alleyways, and then of course the general city budget. So we're really bringing together people not only to get advice from them, but also work with a group of people to equip them with every piece of knowledge they need to see how the legislative branch of government works and hopefully make it better. And when we have a product at the end that is legislation, that legislation is going to have been touched by people. It's not just something that you find out about on the news or something that you find out about after the fact, but you were directly involved in helping craft that legislation, which we've done since we've been in office, but now we're going to make sure that we're doing it directly with our neighborhoods. It also kind of came about because we have a monthly kind of tele-town hall where sometimes it's hit or miss. We might have a representative from a neighborhood or we might not. So we wanted to have a designated group of people from our 10 neighborhoods to make sure they were at the table when we were making decisions about their lives, when we were making decisions about their tax dollars. District 4's 10 residential neighborhoods, of course, include downtown Louisville. It goes west into the Russell neighborhood. We got a small piece of Portland. We come across Broadway. We got California. We got a small piece of Old Louisville. We have Smoketown, Butchertown, Phoenix Hill, Clifton Heights. Again, 10 residential neighborhoods that touch this area. And if you are a constituent in District 4 and you live in one of those neighborhoods, we want you to apply to join. You can apply at any point in time throughout the year. Go to louisvilleky.gov/District 4 or call us at 574-1104 and come and help us make decisions. We talk with the residents about what is the best way to make sure people feel supported when they come to these meetings. And me being who I am, I was like, can we give them a stipend? And they said, no, let's put that money back into the neighborhoods. So what we're going to do is each of the 10 neighborhoods, we're going to give them a small grant from our neighborhood development fund. But also when you come, we're going to give you a meal. We're going to make sure that childcare is taken care of. And then if you don't want to travel or can't travel for whatever reason, we're going to make sure that there's a virtual option, not only for you to video in, but you could also just call in from a landline or from a cell phone or wherever you have a means of making a phone call. And these meetings will be traveling around to the neighborhoods throughout the year. So government by, for, and of the people. We're just making sure that that's apparent in this District 4 Advisory Board.
Wow, that's amazing. And does every district have something like this?
The district that I know who tried something was District 8 when Councilman Brandon Cohen was the representative of that area. I'm not sure how that panned out or if he had it throughout his term, but to my knowledge, I don't know of another district that has something like this. I think that District 5 with Councilwoman Donna Purvis has some sort of advisory group, but I don't know of any entity that brings all of the neighborhoods in a council district together, which I think is really important. Those are the geographical units that kind of touch our districts, and what better way to be reflective of the district than to make sure that those neighborhoods are represented across geographic, political, cultural boundaries. We're trying to break all of that down and make decisions to better our district, but also better the city of Louisville as a whole.
Absolutely. Jeremy?
You mentioned funds for parks, infrastructure, things along those lines. Drugs have been an issue in Louisville for years and years and years at this point, and I feel like a lot of the neighborhoods that you represent, fall in that category as well. Recently with the Sharps containers being installed at like Portland and Boone and somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Is there going to be any type of funding for any type of outreach or resources for individuals that have habits in Louisville? Is that something that's going to fall under the advisory board?
It can, yeah, if it comes up as an issue. I know that Public Health and Wellness has some money and has some projects they've been working on to do that outreach. But if we need to add more, then that's something that we'll work on as an advisory board. The board itself is advisory in nature, but reflective of democracy, I'd like to, every single decision that we're making, to at least take a vote. So I know that when I go into the council chamber, a majority of the neighborhoods in our district, at least through their representatives, were okay with a vote, or were okay with a certain priority, or okay with a grant. I think that's really essential. And I am predicting that most of what we vote on and most of what we discuss will be able to have some consensus around what those issues are. But what's important, like in what you brought up, if something's a priority in a certain area, and in my opinion, what you just asked about is a need, it's important for us to come together, because I might know that need if I'm just talking to you. But what's even more important than just talking to you is us talking to each other, even outside of the purview of the council person, to know, okay, the Portland neighborhood is requesting for more sharp boxes. Down in Clifton Heights, I know you all wanted us to put some money into, let's say, beautification of something. You could argue that's a need, but most of the time you're going to look at that as a want. So if we have X amount of dollars and you all need money for sharp boxes and you all need money to, beautify this piece of a park, we have to make decisions together, because you're all essentially taken from the same District 4 capital infrastructure funds, the same District 4 neighborhood development funds. And up until now, those decisions have solely fallen on me as the council person. But the other, residents and constituents, they don't know that when they ask, that essentially takes from the full pot, which could take from some other needs that we might have. It's also important to know, like, I'm the council person for the district. I live in the Russell neighborhood, proudly live in the Russell neighborhood. So I might represent California, but I don't live in California. I don't sleep in California. I work in California. I go in California, handle business, and then I'm out. If you live in California and you sleep in California, you're going to have a totally different perspective, and your ear is going to be so much closer to the ground as far as what the needs are in that neighborhood. And that goes for any of our neighborhoods. Obviously, me being in Russell, I'm going to be more aware of those issues. But it's impossible for me to know what some of the issues are elsewhere just because I simply do not live there. One of my favorite things that people say to me when they bring up something in the district, it could happen, and then 5 minutes later I'll get a text, hey, this just happened over such and such. And I'll ask for more details, and they say, Well, you didn't know about it? It's in your district. I don't have an eye floating above downtown Louisville that shows me everything that's happening. There are thousands of government employees performing tens of thousands of duties and actions on a daily basis. No one person can keep up with all of that. But we, as a people, can absolutely help keep up with that. And we can help inform each other on what the needs are and what the wants are. And I'm hoping this advisory board makes that a lot more apparent. I've noticed since being on council for almost a couple of years at this point, it's not that we're undeserving. It's not that we're unworthy of better. It's just that we're simply unorganized. So when I go into that chamber, I have to guess a lot of the times if I don't have the knowledge that comes directly from the people. And we try our best. I do my best. But sometimes we get it wrong. And sometimes we simply don't know. So it's important to open up that communication with something like this advisory board.
Did you have any other questions, Ryan?
So, I mean, it really sounds like this advisory board is, being built from the ground up. So y'all are going to, decide what is most important for the neighborhoods from the ground and then go from there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as we have a neighborhood development fund. This last budget, we got let's say $70,000. As a council person, I have to decide how much of that $70,000 is going to services in Russell, how much is going to California, how much is going to Clifton Heights. Somebody might say, well, why don't you give every neighborhood the same amount? That's inequitable because we don't have the same amount of every neighborhood. We only got about half of Russell. We got all of California. We only got a majority of the Central Business District. We got all of Smoketown. We got some of Clifton Heights. We got all of Butchertown. And that's just geography. When you add in income levels, you also can look at it from that equity purview. When you add in the population amount, when you add in other demographics. So how do we come to that decision? I don't know. But I'm hoping that when I get with this neighborhood advisory board, we can work with other smart people who live in these neighborhoods who can help us come to that understanding. And it's not just arbitrarily decided on by the council person.
I love it. A few years ago, well, you and I have known each other for quite a while, but a few years ago, 1200 might have had something to say. And when you were talking about California, you don't sleep in California, you don't live in California, it was reminding me of a rap. And it's something that a lot of people can really relate to, especially with the popularity of rap in these days. So if you were going to rap about this particular advisory board to entice, especially our millennials, the younger folks, to come in, what would that sound like?
What would a rap sound like to get people involved in the neighborhood advisory board? It ain't really a rap, but I'll give you 3 words. I'm a minimalist. So I'll give you 3 words as far as the neighborhood advisory board. And the first word is education. All right. You're learning about government. I'm learning about the neighborhood in turn. So it's like a 2-way street as far as education goes. Education. The second word is organization, because once again, there's no entity, whether it's a government agency, a nonprofit, a grassroots group, no entity has brought these 10 neighborhoods together under one roof to say, let's make decisions together about our community. That doesn't exist. So we're organizing, which I believe is the best way to change any system. Best way to change this city, this commonwealth, and this country is when people organize. And the last but not least, hopefully, it's the product of that education and that organization, which is my job, legislation. Mm-hmm. So the poem this is a short poem. Why should you join the Neighborhood Advisory Board for District 4? Education, organization, legislation.
I love it.
And then hopefully once we get some W's, we can have some celebrations.
I love it. Well, anything else that is going on in your district that you want to make us aware of, please take advantage of that opportunity at this moment.
So the final council meeting of the 2022 calendar year is coming up this Thursday, December 15th. It'll start around 6. If you care about some things on the agenda, you might want to come in around 7, because for that first hour, we got council people that are leaving, so they about to be getting their flowers and a bunch of boo-hoos and speeches and all of that good stuff. So you might want to come a little later after that's done. But there's a few things on the agenda that I think masses should really be paying attention to. The first thing is the rental registry ordinance. This has been worked on since June. So here we are half a year later, finally passing this legislation. And there's quite a few changes, but I want to focus on one. And that one change that's going to be crucial going forward for the power of tenants and the dignity and the living conditions of tenants and renters is that instead of code enforcement coming out when you complain, which could result in retaliation from a landlord, which could also put a burden on you to have to become a property manager and figure out, oh, I need to complain about this, not about that. Instead of them coming out only when you complain, we are now going to create a program with proactive rental inspections, which is something that our 2019 housing needs assessment said we needed to do in some of these areas where the rental properties are falling apart. It says we need to be proactive, not wait until it gets to where the ceiling is caving in and you got black mold everywhere and whatever other issue. We need to go in and be proactive. So after Thursday, that new program will be codified into law. It will be in our new rental registry ordinance, but we have to make sure that it passes. It passed out of committee last week, and I'm happy that we were able to work out something. But nothing is official or set in stone until it passes that full council, and then of course it gets signed into law by our mayor. So if you care about renter power, if you care about tenant power, the rental registry ordinance is on the agenda coming up this Thursday.
And specifically what you want people to do then is to contact their Metro Council person and say that they want them to approve this legislation.
To vote for this legislation, 574-1100 to call, and if you don't know who your Metro Council person is, or if you do know what district you're in, 574-11, and then the last two digits are whatever district you're in. So if you're in District 4, I support it, but if you call us, 574-1104, maybe you're in District 11 with Councilman Kevin Kramer, 574-1111. If you're in District 24, 574-1124. So whatever the council district you're in, those last two digits will be how you get to your council office, or you can email them, louisvilleky.gov/district, whatever that number is, or if you just go to the top of the city website, you can find your council person too. And there's a map if you don't know, or again, you can just call City Hall, 574-1100. It's really important to contact your elected officials, because when I'm in the City Hall and I'm in that chamber and I make a statement, all they got to do is say, actually, my constituents disagree with that. That's not really the case. But if constituents are telling their council person and they're reinforcing what I said, or I'm reinforcing what they said, I can say, actually, nah, bro, because such and such filled out this form and they sent you 1,000 emails saying that they support this. So now you're voting against the needs of your constituents.
But I'm actually going to put one of the map makers, the Logix maps, in my live stream so you can navigate through this map. If you don't know what district you're in, you can find it very quickly, and that makes a huge difference.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Is this the same legislation that the Louisville Tenants Union's been kind of pushing for?
So they were involved way early on, but like I said, we were June is when this originally got filed. And I think, this is my opinion, I think to a certain extent, legislation being drug out for so long is a momentum killer for the people who care about it. Because who's going to keep up with legislation for half a year, unless you get paid to keep up with legislation for half a year? So the legislation that I worked on with them real closely was the resolution calling on Louisville Metro Housing Authority to cancel a contract with a problematic property manager. And that passed. And not too long after it passed, they quit. So that was definitely a win for tenants in this city. It put property managers, it put landlords who are not doing their job and doing their job in a just way on notice, and let them know that tenants are building power. And what I always try to explain to people, especially tenants when I'm out and about talking with constituents, it's way more of y'all than it is of them. You got one landlord. You in Dosker Manor, you got, almost 700 units of people. And no telling how many people that is, period, but almost 700 units and one landlord. If y'all came together,
it's interesting.
Powerful.
Because I went to the governor's press conference when he announced the new affordable housing company that just opened its headquarters downtown in a historic building. And they're building a lot of affordable housing around town. And one of the questions that I asked of them is, did you bring your own property manager, or are you subcontracting to people here locally? Because frankly, we haven't had a lot of luck with a lot of them. And they said at that time they subcontract and they're working on their own, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they will. But, I've been shocked, been beyond shocked at the state of the places we've gone in to both of us have gone into various affordable housing complexes and seen footprints that result in, you step on a board and the dust flies up, water coming down the walls, mold everywhere, insects and critters coming in. And some of these are fairly new buildings, which is shocking. They just build a place and all of a sudden it's got rats and it's got, floors that are falling apart and water coming in everywhere. It seems unconscionable to me.
Yeah, no one should live that way. That's why nowadays when I talk about affordable housing, I also talk about comfortable and sustainable housing. Because just because it's affordable doesn't mean that it's going to be comfortable to live in or it's going to be sustained long-term to live in. But no one should be living that way whatsoever. Housing is a human right, and that housing needs to have some dignity to it. You should feel comfortable and safe every time that you go home. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Whether you're a mom with kids, a senior citizen, a veteran, a single guy, doesn't matter. Every single one of these groups of people needs to be considered as humans and not just commodities that are shuffled into the housing. It's kind of like with our houseless friends, The unhoused population is shuffled like a deck of cards across the city. Clear the camp downtown, and then everybody in the neighborhood's complaining about, we've got so many homeless people here. Funniest thing. If they're driven out of their camps, where are they supposed to go? This is a constant battle that we've fought for years and years and years.
Which leads me to another item on the agenda. We found some money that was unused from the American Rescue Plan to put some more money into a winter shelter program. Last year, our office put the money up for that, in some cases against the will of some of our constituents. But in the words of King, leaders don't necessarily just look for consensus, they mold consensus. So even though we had some constituents saying, hey, why would you take 60,000 of the neighborhood development fund? Keep in mind, we only got 60, 70,000 and put it up to shelter people for the winter because their lives depend on it. I would rather say we spent that money and saved some people's lives than hold on to that money for a block party or for a mural. Shout out to all the artists. I love art. And then you see the news and somebody froze to death outside, or they lost an arm, or they lost a leg.
Absolutely.
So sometimes we got to make decisions that aren't necessarily popular, but are right. And we did that last year, and thankfully we did that, and it helped influence going into this year because last year was 60,000, this year is 300,000. Now I want to preface that and say the 300,000, that's great. It's an increase from last year. But a few weeks ago, I motioned to take 1.2 million of the 30 million surplus that we had. And now we got more because the sheriff's office and the county clerk's office, they got a surplus. So we're getting more surplus. But when we had 30 million, I tried to take 1.2 million and use it for that winter shelter program because Dr. Susan Bacino said that's what we need bare minimum to make sure we shelter people this winter. If we get 8, we can also do case management and a whole bunch of other things to help people get into housing long term. It failed for a bunch of random reasons that made no sense to me. I don't know what is more urgent than making sure people are sheltered and don't freeze to death outside. I'll also add that when I made this motion, I was telling them I just got a text from Donnie Green talking about kids sleeping in cars.
Lots of kids.
Kids sleeping in cars. So all the different stereotypes that council members got and all the excuses around, well, they did this to themselves, or they don't want to be in housing or housing. Okay, we'll argue about that another day, but you're not going to tell me that this kid chose to sleep in that car over sleeping in a bed in shelter in a warm, safe place.
It's estimated that up to 10,000 Jefferson County school students are houseless. They're couch surfing, they're sleeping in cars, they're staying with friends, every place but in their own bedroom, in their own home. That's a serious problem.
Absolutely. I forgot who said it, but they said we have a budget surplus and I guess they said a compassion deficit. I think that's what they said. It's like we got all this money and we can do something with it to save lives, but instead we're going to hold on to it for whatever reason.
The rainy day fund.
Right.
How much harder can it rain?
Right. They're literally raining people at this point, and we have an ability to do something about it. And that's why like engagement is so important. Because whatever excuses they have, none of that holds weight to 10, 50, 100, 1,000 constituents in these districts saying, you need to vote for that. You need to support that. You need to champion that. Because I'm one vote. We need 14 votes to pass anything. I'm glad we're getting this 300,000. And again, that's going to be on the agenda coming up Thursday. But we need a lot more. A lot more.
Well, consider the fact that last year when they did the survey asking Will Billions by Metro Council, what are your top priorities? Here's the group of things that you can choose from. And number one, above everything else, was our unhoused population. The seriousness of homelessness. So that means that people, even in districts that are not as affected, are aware of it.
Absolutely.
And want to do something.
And if you look at a map of those survey results, it showed people responding all over the city who said that was their number one priority. And that's an example, when I said the power of the people is stronger than the people of power, that survey is a real life example of how it influences government decisions, because most of the money we've spent from that American Rescue Plan has been on housing. And that was the case last year, but even this year we spent even more money on housing. A direct reflection of what people said their priorities are. Your voice is so important. And sometimes it's easy to say, I give up because my voice doesn't matter or nothing happened. It takes practice. It takes persistence. I descend from people who were enslaved on plantations. One of my great-grandfathers and his mother actually ran away. She had a baby in her. They ran off a plantation. Some of them fought in wars to get to where we are today. If they can do that, enslaved, we can do it with all the tools to resources and information that we have today. If our ancestors can fight through segregation, them and all the allies, if they can do that then, I know that we can do that now, if not more, because we got so much access to information. Like nothing I'm saying is should be news to you. It could be news to you, but nothing I'm saying could be used. Like that agenda, it's online right now. And it's impossible to keep up with everything. But if there's something on that agenda you care about, there's nothing stopping you by yourself or getting together with a group of people who care about it to come and speak to Metro Council or to come and just sit in that chamber and occupy space.
And one of the things, Jecorey, that I saw happening during the Breonna Taylor protests was citizens understanding and finally realizing they do have a voice.
Absolutely.
And you can come to Metro Council and you can affect change and you can meet with city government officials who you never thought you would have any kind of interaction with, because that's our right as citizens. 1,000%.
And going back to like the majority piece, when I mentioned Oscar Manor, almost 700 units, one landlord. Think about council districts. Almost 30,000 people, one council member.
Yeah.
Almost 30,000 people in District 26. One Nicole George. Almost 30,000 people in District 4. One Jecorey Arthur. How many of hoping this District 4 Advisory Board is a vehicle for that are coming together to help influence decisions? Those numbers are power.
Huge.
They were in 2020, only about 1,400 people voted. 1,400 people out of 30,000. And just to like reduce the numbers more, we're talking about maybe 15,000 registered Democrats. If you can get together 1,400 people in our council district, I'll do anything you tell me to. I'm using myself as an example, but I'm just talking about like accountability.
Sure.
I'm temporarily here. This seat belongs to the people of District 4. But when I'm out of office, now you all are connected and organized to hold the next person accountable and say, hey, the 10 neighborhoods came together and these are our priorities. What are you going to do about it? And how are you going to work with us to meet that expectation?
You've created a template.
This is beyond me. This is about we. You wanted more raps.
Yeah,
So like this is so essential, and like we're doing it through our office officially, but there's nothing stopping other residents from coming together with neighborhood associations or coming together with residents and creating something informal.
Absolutely.
Do it. Nobody's stopping you from doing that.
Start with a block watch. I mean,
Facts.
get your neighbors together and start watching out for each other. Get involved in something like this, a district advisory board.
There's advisory boards for pretty much everything at this point. So like, it makes sense that there's one made, to go in this direction. Because it's like you said, 30,000 people, one representative.
Right.
You're not going to catch it all. But if you got 10 people on board that are listening to to 10 people, and then they're listening to 10 people, and it's all coming in. You're going to get the information that you need, and hopefully, everybody gets the help that they need. So I think it's a great idea, personally. If the Cherokee Triangle Cherokee Triangle Architectural Review Committee can make decisions to demolish housing, then it makes absolute sense that there could be some type of board that could combat that.
Yeah, I mean, there's boards and commissions and committees that execute policy all day long, and there's plenty of people who volunteer their time for those boards and commissions and committees. I don't know of much of anything that exists on the legislative branch side and the city hall side, the metro council side, where there's a group of people advising on policy, not just executing policy, but creating policy, making the rules of our city. I just don't know of anything like that exists. And the advisory boards that I've seen have largely been, again, execution, constituency services. But not often are people sitting down and like hashing out legislation. And I think, again, you're going to get a better product at the end of the day. We can point to all sorts of examples of legislation that passed. It's like, we didn't support that. That's not what we asked for. Like the WEOP thing that everybody's so critical of, that I'm critical of. I don't know of large groups of people that were involved in that process. And I would say I'm fairly like paying attention and having an understanding of, the needs and the wants of the West End. But I can't think of a group of people in the West End that say, you know what we need? We need to take all of the West End and put it in a tax increment financing district. Let alone even knowing what that is.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm excited. I'm so excited, and I think people are really stepping into their power, from the unions that are forming, to this advisory board, to people just being able to speak up and protest and say this is what we want. And I heard overwhelmingly in 2020 people wanted to be more engaged in policy. So
Absolutely.
Now here's a chance for our constituents to do that.
Here's your chance. Thank you, Jecorey. We appreciate you. Councilman Jecorey Arthur, District 4 in Metro Council. And just a short time ago, you were elected as the youngest Metro Councilman ever elected, which is fantastic. But how many years has this work aged you? I'm
like 60 now, so it's like double. I got grays in I'm excited to have gray hair though. And I'm looking for the next youngest, I think you gotta be 18 to run for city council. So we need, I came in with like maybe 27, 28. Where the 25-year-olds at? Where the early 20s at? Where's the 18-year-old? I think Metro Council is beyond ready to shift in terms of generations that are represented on this thing, because it's definitely not reflective of our community.
No. Thank you so much, Jecorey. We
Thank
appreciate you.
I appreciate you.